Thank you to everyone for your feedback regarding my pan. I'm getting most of it off. It's completely smooth though, so it might just be a bit discoloured for the rest of its life. But I also took a lot of advice, and I'm getting a cast iron type pot as well, because apparently that's the biz. So thanks, and my journey with this one will continue. Hello, do you want to come up and see the children and the kiddies? What a good dog. What a good, look at you, so springy Ada, you're getting better. Hey, who's getting better? Don't go up that ladder. Just because this yard is different and she can't always come into it, she's so excited to be there every time. This is like a little entertaining yard. Our English country garden. Come on. I didn't even know that was going to be shut. Go see the children. Hello, this film is about the Ka-Bar Becker BK40 folding knife. So ergonomically speaking, that Becker handle definitely does its job of being a Becker handle. It's very, very comfortable. I actually really like the aesthetic of this knife. However, when you look at it from the top here, you see something that is, quite frankly, from Ka-Bar and from Becker, fairly unforgivable. And that is, of course, the tip down initial pocket clip.
Tip down, you say? Fantastic.
Also, yeah, I don't particularly care it's made in China, but don't write China on the top. It's just a weird place to write it. Why does it even need to have it there? You could put it small around the tang if you have to, or just put it on the box. I don't need any writing on the blade spine ever. Thanks. Thumb studs, I actually really like. They're super simple, but they look really good, I think. They match the aesthetic of the piece really well. And also, they're not super sharp or anything. They just do a really good job of being thumb studs. I always find thumb studs often have like weird pyramid shapes to them or excessive knurling on them and things like that. And those ones are, I think, particularly good thumb studs, especially for a knife such as this. Come on, guys. Whose shit all over the eggs? Ah! I bet whoever it was the one that did this egg. Wow. I'd probably shit myself too. Look, so while it's inexpensive and it's relatively well put together and well made, and the liner lock isn't the thinnest, Certain elements of this knife aren't super suited to taking out and flogging like you would a fixed blade. Obviously, it's still a folding knife. What they could have done if they wanted to make it lean more into that successfully, they could have made it at least a lockback or put a pin system in it or something. I think the most successful knife for that sort of thing that I have that's a folding knife is probably the SR1 Lite by Cold Steel, or the SR1, or perhaps something like the 8010. Knives like this, knives look like this at the spine, they have big, thick, sort of multi-stage locks. They're the ones that you want to take to the woods. If you want something that folds, that you can still, pry rocks off of other rocks with, and that sort of thing, probably more of an SR1 Lite job than a K-Bar Becker BK40 job. The fact that it looks like a fixed blade is, I think, where the fixed blade idea of it ends. It looks like a really nice version of the BK16, but I wouldn't recommend putting it into any of those roles, and that's fine because it is a folding knife. So in terms of steel, the AUS8 here is not going to perform like, it's going to be very similar to an 8CR13 MOV type steel. So for me, I'm unlikely ever going to bother putting a really good edge on a knife such as this. But that being said, you can get a great edge, a completely serviceable edge, just by using like a simple stone tool. I always recommend the Worksharp Field Sharpener. And using something like this, you'll be able to continue having a very serviceable, very good, even paper slicing, quite easily edge on this knife. It's just, I've noticed very soon after I started using it, you just start getting sort of flat, dull spots on there, just much less tolerant to hitting either very fibrous things or even just like hard things. So the AUS8, it's definitely that noticeable level of lower end steel. Just on an aside, I think this would be quite a cool gift combination with this sharpener. It's a bit like a first knife or a beginner's type knife, and a sharpener for a beginner's sharpening. It's quite a cool little idea for, it's probably going to be just over $110 or something for both of them. So, I'd like this as a gift if I, didn't already have them. So the knife comes with a Spyderco style wire clip, very similar to the one on the Spidey Chef or the Swish Bowie knife. So I really like wire clips. I think they look nice in the pocket. They look sort of like pens. They allow for good deep carry, which this one does. For a big chunky knife, it carries very well actually, owing in fact to the smooth scales, which is not in terms of being a scale the best attribute, but in terms of being nice and carryable, it does disappear quite easily into the pocket. The clip can be worn left-handed or right-handed, and if you're a psychopath, you can also wear it tip down on the left or right side as well. In terms of using the knife, if you're okay with the knife being a bit bigger and a bit heavier, it's actually very usable and it does knife stuff quite well. It's not going to cut as nicely as the Civivi Elementum, for example, that has a really nice, keen, hollow grind on it. This is a flat ground knife with a thicker blade stock. But what it does have out of the box is a pretty keen factory edge. And because the blade is taller, they have put a pretty decent flat grind on there. It's somewhat thin behind the edge. Again, it's nothing any better than, say, an average Spyderco or something like that, but it's definitely not super thick and chunky like, well, frankly, like some zero tolerance knives are, and they're far more expensive than this out of the box. They're far less good to cut. So, for what it is, it actually does a quite good job at being a proper slicer. So you can do some basic food prep and things like that. With this knife, it's not going to be as enjoyable as using your native chief or your your Spidey Chef or your Almar Eagle Ultralight, but it's fine. It's a fine performer. And I think the whole thing behind this knife is that if you really love Becker's design, if you really like Becker's handle, then this is going to have a lot of win for you because it is really good in the hand, and it does almost perfectly mirror a folding version of probably one of his most visually appealing designs. I think the BK16 and the BK16 and 17 knives, I think are great looking knives. As I said, I would love to see some different materials. I'd love to see some micarta scales. I'd love to see some S35 VN at the very least, let alone anything better, but S35 in the blade would be great. Or even if they just kept this exactly as it is and put G10, VG10. Those two things I think would escalate it above feeling like such a budget knife in terms of materials. So I am going to wind this review up by saying I actually recommend this knife. I didn't think I would. I thought it'd be a gimmick, but you can't get past the handle. It's good. The blade is nice for a bigger knife blade. If you're okay with a heavy-ish knife that is large in your hand and in your pocket, you could really do a lot worse. It's quite cost effective as well, and as I said, it's only let down by material performance, by the plastic feeling a little bit too plastic and the blade steel being just a little bit far back. I try not to be a blade steel snob anymore, but AUS 8 to me is about that point where it's like you want a bit better no matter what the knife is than AUS 8, 8CR, 13 MOV. My end point now that I like to stop at quite happily is VG10. I love a VG10 knife with a smile on my face. And I'd love them just to push a little bit harder in the materials, but apart from that, quite well done.